Hi folks, I'm Bob Sunday from Taos Stove. Today we're going to do some burn time tests on some of my stove models. The one we're going to do here today first is called the Aries. Aries being the god of fire, and I think it's a pretty fitting name for a stove. So a few things about this stove is that it's a stove that has its pot stand built in. It's a standard open chimney stove, and I use the top of a beverage can to slide over an existing two-piece open chimney stove. Standard little open chimney stove, and we'll burn this one in a little bit. But you don't have to use a separate pot stand with it. The body actually makes it a pot stand. Once your pot is on top of it, it turns it into basically a low pressure stove. It builds up a little bit of pressure inside, and it works no different than this stove, which is a closed stove, again just made from a couple cans, but it does the same thing. Once you cut the air off here, the flame on the inside goes out, and it's what the blooming around the outside of the stove creates the heat for it to turn it to a gas, and then it'll burn. So we're going to go through the process now. We're going to do 2 cups of water, and we'll time it, and we'll see how it goes. Nowadays, a lot of people are using wick wrapped around their stoves. I really prefer to use primer pans. The only thing I have about the wick is that for me personally, I don't like getting the alcohol all over me. And I feel when you're loading a wick, holding the stove up and loading the wick around the outside, you get a lot of alcohol on you. I've been in a lot of solvents and things over the last 38 years of being in the woodworking business, and I just try to keep things cut back as far as I can about immersing my body in those kind of things. So so I do the primer pans, and that's how we do it. So let's load some alcohol in there and see how this stove does. We'll use 1 ounce today and see what we get. Now with this stove, put about 1 ounce in there. Now with this stove and using the primer pan, what you need to do is to take a little bit of alcohol, dribble in from the, you don't really even need to squeeze your bottle. Once it's down, it'll pretty much feed what you need. And I don't always hit it. Sometimes I don't put enough alcohol around it to get it to bloom. And you just let it kind of cool down, put a little bit more alcohol on it, and light it again. So let's see what we do. All right. So now, with this kind of stove too, you need to let the stove warm up. Aluminum dissipates heat very quickly, but it also warms up very quickly, and it blooms. The blooming and this is for the folks that are not used to these. That's when the gas starts coming out of the vents or jets around the outside of the stove, and it'll bloom. And that's what we have happening right now. Pretty warm now, I'd say. Let's let the stove take a little bit of heat off of that, and let's start our stove, and let's see what we do as far as boiling a couple ounces of water. At this time, I'm going to turn the lights down some just so you can see the flame pattern under the stove better. This stove is a pretty aggressive stove. It throws out a lot of heat, but again, you throw out a lot of heat, you burn a lot of alcohol. It's really a stove that's meant for someone who wants to carry something very light, and when most of their needs are boiling just a couple cups of water to do a dehydrated meal, or make a cup of coffee, and they just want to get it done fast. This is a good stove for that. And as I said, it's very light, it's easy to carry, it's easy to use. You know, we're already starting to get some sound out of this stove, and we're at about 4 minutes. We'll take a look at it, and yeah, we're starting to get some bubbles coming up off the bottom. Well, I think we got a boil going here, and we're at 5 minutes 20 seconds. Let's just, we're going to let her roll and just see what kind of burn time we get for an ounce of alcohol. I think this is a good little stove for folks that aren't used to using alcohol stoves. Simple. There's not a lot. There's no moving parts in it except for that primer pan, which you just slide underneath if you call it a moving part. So it's a pretty simple little stove to use, and it's a good one to have to get to know alcohol stoves. And I would always say to someone who's new to it, this is a great model to buy and learn if they want to use it. All right. Well, it looks like we went out. Let's see what we got here. 10 minutes. We'll call it 10 minutes. Probably went out for a second earlier than that. So basically we got about 10 minutes for an ounce of alcohol on this stove. Which means, you know, a little bit over, and you could boil 4 cups of water in 10 minutes. You just swap out and boil another. So math tells us that you'd use about a half an ounce to boil 2 cups of water. That's not too bad in the alcohol world. And like I said, it's a good starter stove. It's a good stove to just introduce yourself and to the stoves and just get used to using them. Well, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll come back here in a little bit and take another model and light it up. Thanks.